Welcome to Pragim Technologies. I am Venkat. This is part 47 of SQL Server. In this session, we'll learn about instead of delete trigger. Before continuing with this session, I strongly recommend to watch parts 45 and 46 of this video series. In SQL Server, there are three types of triggers: DML, DDL, and logon triggers. DML triggers are fired in response to DML events. Examples of DML events include insert, update, and delete. DML triggers can further be classified into two types: after triggers and instead of triggers. After triggers are fired automatically after the triggering action, whereas instead of triggers are fired instead of the triggering action. Now we know that in general, instead of triggers are extremely useful whenever you have a view that's based on multiple tables, and if you want to either insert data into it or update a view, update that particular view, then instead of triggers are extremely useful. Along the same lines, instead of delete trigger is also used to delete a row from a view that's based on multiple tables. Now we have been working with this TBL department employee table, in all these sessions of where we have discussed about triggers in this video series. So we have TBL department table here, which has got department ID and department name columns, and we have TBL employee table, which has got ID, name, gender, and department ID columns. Now if you look at these two tables, the common column between them is the department ID columns. So based on these two tables, we have created this view which returns the ID, name, gender, and department name. Okay, so department name column is coming from TBL department, and ID, name, and gender are coming from TBL department table. So obviously this view is based on these two base tables: TBL employee, TBL department. Now let us say somebody is trying to delete from the view. So obviously delete from view where ID is equal to 1. So we are trying to delete John's record from this view. So obviously when you delete this record from this view, and we know that this view is based on these two tables, TBL employee and TBL department, so your delete is definitely going to affect the underlying base table. So there is a confusion. Do you want to actually delete John's record or the HR department record from TBL department table? Okay, so SQL Server will actually not allow any modification that affects multiple base tables. So you're trying to update this view or delete a row from this view, and that delete is going to affect multiple base tables, in this case TBL employee and TBL department. So when you try to execute this statement, you will get an error: view or function view employee details is not updatable because the modification affects multiple base tables. So let's look at this in action. So in SQL Server Management Studio, we have got these two tables, TBL employee and TBL department. Let's try to retrieve the data from them. So employee and department table. So let's create a view on these two tables. Create view. Command completed successfully. Refresh the views folder and you should see the view there. So now let's select the data from the view. So select star from that specific view. So we get the data as expected. Alright, now let's try to execute this delete statement. Delete from view employees where ID is equal to 1. So we get that error: view or function view employee details is not updatable because the modification affects multiple base tables. Alright, so now let's create an instead of delete trigger on this view. Okay, so obviously to create a trigger we use create trigger statement. So here is the trigger that we are creating. Let's look at this. So we are creating this trigger: create trigger, a meaningful trigger name on view employee details, and you are creating this trigger instead of delete. So this trigger should be fired instead of the delete statement as begin end, and then all you're doing here is delete TBL employee from. Okay, so this delete statement is actually making use of a join. So we are joining TBL employee with the deleted table. So we have spoken about joins in the previous session of this video series. So if you're new to joins, please check that video. So what we are doing here is basically, we know that triggers makes use of two special tables called inserted and deleted tables. Okay, inserted table will contain the newly inserted data, and we have spoken about this when we discussed about instead of insert trigger. And when we use instead of update trigger, deleted and inserted table, both of them are used. Okay, deleted table contains the data before update, which means the old data, and the inserted table contains the new data after the update. Okay, so instead of update makes use of both the tables, whereas instead of delete, makes use of only the deleted table. So here the deleted table contains only the deleted records, and inserted table will basically be empty when you are making use of instead of delete trigger. Similarly, for instead of insert, the deleted table will be empty because you're only inserting a row, so the newly inserted row will be present in that inserted table. Okay, so what we are doing here, we're actually retrieving, we are joining the deleted table, because if you delete 5 records, all those 5 records will be there in the deleted table. So we are taking all the IDs from the deleted table, joining them with TBL employee and deleting them from TBL employee table. So you're doing that using joins. And another way to do it is actually to use a subquery. And if you look at this subquery, it's very simple to understand. All you're saying here is delete from TBL employee, where ID in select ID from deleted table. So you're taking the ID from the deleted table, all the IDs that are present in the deleted table within the subquery, and then those are the IDs that are being deleted from TBL employee table. So obviously this subquery is easy to understand just by looking at that. They are very simple to read. But then from a performance point, in most of the cases joins are faster than subqueries. But however, there are rare cases when you only need a subset of records from the table that you're joining with, subqueries can be faster. Okay, so if you have two tables and you want to join those two tables, and from the other table with which you're joining, let's say it's a huge table which has got millions and millions of records, but then in that table you only want 2 or 3 records, and there is a condition based on which you are selecting those 2 or 3 records, obviously. So in those cases, use a subquery, because you're not joining with every row in that huge table. When you select those rows using the subquery, your query will be much faster than using joins. So but these are very rare, but in general we use joins. In fact, when you use subqueries, SQL Server converts them into joins. Okay, but then in general it's better to use joins over subqueries. Okay, so that's the trigger that we are using here instead of delete trigger. So let's create that. Command completed successfully. So if you look at the view itself, refresh that, and if we expand the view, you should see the trigger that we have just created, tr view employee details instead of delete trigger. Now let's try to delete from that view and see what's going to happen. Now before we do that, let's select the data from the employees view. So we have records 1 and 2. So 2 rows affected, which means we have deleted those rows. And to confirm that, let's select the rows back from the view, select star from view, and you should see records with ID 1 and 2 are no longer there. And just to make sure, we have deleted them from the base tables. So from the employee table, records with ID is equal to 1 and 2 are gone. Okay, now if you look at this, the subquery part is actually commented, but you can either use joins or subqueries. So let's actually try to uncomment this one, the subquery, and comment this just to prove that your subquery works in the same way. And obviously, since we have already created this trigger, you just need to alter this because it already exists there. So alter trigger, execute command completed successfully. Now let's try to delete records with ID 3, 4 and see if it works the exact same way. 2 rows affected. Let's select from the view. If you look at that, records with ID 3 and 4 are no longer there. Let's check that in the base tables just to make sure. So records with ID 3 and 4 are no longer there even in TBL employees table. So On this slide, you can find resources for ASP.NET C Sharp and SQL Server interview questions. That's it for today. Thank you for listening. Have a great day.